Imagine for a moment that everything you've learned about Adam and Eve is just the tip of the iceberg of a much deeper and more transformative truth. Edgar Cayce reveals to us that these were not simply two people walking in a garden thousands of years ago. They represent something much grander, the very journey of the human soul as it immerses itself in the experience of physical matter. When we understand Adam and Eve as spiritual archetypes, we begin to see our own story reflected in them, our own struggle between the divine within us and the density of the world we choose to experience. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine not a place, but a state of being where every breath is pure harmony, where body, mind, and spirit dance in perfect harmony. This was the true Eden according to Edgar Cayce, not a physical garden with trees and rivers, but a dimension of consciousness where humanity still recognized itself as an indivisible part of the divine. It was a state where there was no separation between the human and the sacred, where every thought was light and every feeling was love. In this paradisiacal state, there was no pain because there was no forgetting who we truly were. The expulsion from Eden, therefore, was not a forced passage through golden gates, but rather a devastating inner fall. It was the moment when human consciousness fragmented, losing the memory of its divine origin. Like a star that chooses to experience darkness, the human soul chose to plunge into the illusion of separation. This fall was not geographic, but vibrational, a gradual shift away from the frequency of unconditional love. The lost paradise is not somewhere distant in the past, but within each of us, waiting to be rediscovered. When we understand that Eden is an inner state, we realize that the true spiritual journey is not about returning to a place, but about returning to a state of being. It's about remembering who we are beyond the limitations we've constructed in our minds. Every moment of profound peace, every instant of genuine connection with the divine, is a glimpse of the Eden we never truly lose. It has always been here, pulsing silently in our hearts, waiting for our consciousness to expand enough to embrace it again. The beauty of this revelation is that it removes us from the position of victims of an ancestral punishment and places us as protagonists of our own journey back. Eden is not a privilege lost forever, but a state of consciousness accessible to all who choose to walk the inner path. It is the promise whispered in every sincere prayer, in every act of genuine love, in every moment of total surrender to the sacred mystery of life. The garden is here now, waiting for our soul to remember how to inhabit it with reverence and gratitude. Understanding Eden as consciousness completely transforms our relationship with spirituality, for it shows us that the divine is not distant, but intimate, not in the future, but present, not outside, but within. This is the first key to unlocking the mystery of Adam and Eve. They are you and me on our journey of forgetting and remembering, of falling and rising, of separation and union. Paradise is not a destination, but a way of walking, not a place, but a presence. Prepare for a revelation that may shake all your beliefs about evil and temptation. The serpent of Eden, that dark figure we've learned to fear and condemn, takes on a new dimension in Edgar Cayce's visions. It's not an evil external entity bent on destroying humanity, but rather a powerful representation of the energy of desire when directed by the ego rather than the spirit. It's the inner voice we all know, the one that whispers promises of power, control, and instant gratification, forgetting the eternal wisdom that dwells within our hearts. This serpent lives within each of us, not as an enemy, but as a teacher in disguise. The symbolism of the serpent is profoundly revealing when we understand its dual nature. On the one hand, it represents the life force, the kundalini energy that can elevate us to the highest states of consciousness. On the other, when misdirected, it becomes the energy that binds us to the basest desires and illusions of the material world. The serpent in Eden symbolizes that crucial moment when humanity had to choose between following the wisdom of the heart or the impulses of the ego. It was the first great spiritual crossroads, where free will manifested itself in all its power and responsibility. When Eve hears the serpent's voice, she is not being seduced by an external, diabolical force, but is dialoguing with her own developing human nature. The serpent represents that part of us that wants to experience, know, possess, and control, even if it means giving up innocence and a direct connection with the divine. It is the energy of questioning, of the desire for autonomy, of the desire to become like gods through intellectual knowledge rather than intuitive wisdom. This is not an evil energy per se, but a powerful force that needs to be understood and transformed. The great lesson Cayce brings us is that the serpent should not be rejected or fought, but rather understood and transmuted. It is an integral part of the human experience, the force that drives us toward either evolution or devolution, depending on how we choose to direct it. When we learn to recognize the voice of the inner serpent, the one that promises happiness through possession, power through domination, and knowledge through separation, we can begin to consciously transform it. The serpent can become our ally when its energy is channeled toward the genuine pursuit of truth rather than ego gratification. The true power of this revelation lies in realizing that every temptation we face in our lives is an echo of that first dialogue between Eve and the serpent. Every moment we choose between love and fear, between union and separation, between wisdom and merely intellectual knowledge, we are reliving this primordial archetype. The serpent is not our enemy, but our most rigorous teacher, the one who forces us to develop discernment, willpower, and a genuine connection with our divine essence. Through it, we learn the difference between desiring and loving, between possessing and serving. Understanding the serpent in this revolutionary way frees us from ancestral guilt and empowers us as conscious co-creators of our reality. We are not victims of external temptation, but courageous navigators learning to direct the powerful currents of our own nature. The serpent of Eden lives in every choice we make, in every word we speak, in every thought we entertain. It is the eternal invitation to growth through responsibility, to awakening through experience, to wisdom through the conscious transformation of desire into unconditional love. Now we come to the heart of the mystery, to the moment that defined the entire subsequent human journey. The fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was not a golden apple hanging from an earthly branch, but rather the most powerful symbol of the fundamental choice every soul makes when deciding to experience life in matter. Edgar Cayce reveals to us that this fruit represents something much deeper and more transformative, the conscious decision to delve into the experience of duality, to know life through the contrast between opposites. It was the courageous yet painful choice to leave perfect unity to learn about love through separation, about light through darkness. The act of eating this fruit was not a rebellious act of disobedience, but a quantum leap in humanity's spiritual evolution. Imagine a soul living in perfect harmony, knowing only goodness, light, and love, voluntarily deciding to experience its opposite to truly understand divinity. It was like a star deciding to experience darkness to fully appreciate its own light. This was the great sacrifice of human consciousness, giving up innocence to gain wisdom, exchanging blissful ignorance for painful but liberating knowledge. It was not a fall, but an intentional immersion in the great laboratory of dual experience. When Adam and Eve tasted this symbolic fruit, they not only gained intellectual knowledge, but also opened the doors of perception to a completely new reality. Suddenly they could perceive pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow, birth and death, union and separation. It was as if their spiritual eyes adjusted to a new dimension of existence, a dimension where every experience had its corresponding opposite. This was not divine punishment, but a natural expansion of consciousness that chose to grow through contrast. The fruit of knowledge was, in fact, the fruit of the complete experience of life. The genius of Cayce's interpretation is that it transforms what seemed to be humanity's first mistake into its first act of evolutionary courage. The choice to acknowledge duality was the decision to become conscious co-creators, to learn about divinity not through passive contemplation, but through active participation in the cosmic drama. It was accepting the challenge of finding unity amid multiplicity, of discovering love amidst apparent lovelessness, of recognizing light amidst the deepest shadows. The knowledge of good and evil was not a curse, but the first step on the journey of conscious return to the source. Each of us on our personal journey continues to eat this fruit daily. Each time we choose to face our fears rather than run from them, each time we embrace our shadows to transform them into light, each time we find compassion amidst judgment, we are digesting the profound lessons of this primordial knowledge. Duality is not our prison, but our school. It is not our punishment, but our opportunity for growth. Through it, we learn that true wisdom lies not in avoiding opposites, but in transcending them through love. The lasting legacy of the forbidden fruit is the understanding that we are divine beings having a temporary human experience, and that this experience, however painful it may be, is the most direct path back home. Every contrast we experience is an opportunity to consciously choose love. Every duality we face is an invitation to find the underlying unity. The knowledge Adam and Eve gained was not about good versus evil, but about how to consciously navigate between opposites. Until we return to the perception of unity, we never truly lose. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if we could see the true energetic nature of the fall of Adam and Eve? Edgar Cayce offers us a revolutionary insight that completely transcends the traditional interpretation of this primordial event. According to his revelations, the fall was not a divine punishment for disobedience, but a profound vibrational transformation that altered the very structure of human consciousness. It was as if humanity had decided to lower its spiritual frequency, moving from an almost etheric, luminous and subtle existence to a dense material and heavy experience. It was a gradual and necessary process, a courageous choice of the soul to learn about divinity through limitation. Imagine beings of pure light choosing to inhabit dense physical bodies, to experience sensations they could never know in their original state. This vibrational descent was like a celestial symphony choosing to play in a lower octave, not out of limitation, but out of a desire to explore new sonic possibilities. The subtle, nearly translucent bodies, which allowed telepathic communication and movement through thought, gradually solidified until they became the flesh and blood we know today. This process did not happen instantaneously, but over eons, as consciousness adapted to the increasing densities of matter. The beauty of this revelation lies in understanding that the vibrational descent was not a degradation, but a specialization. Like an artist who chooses to work with denser materials to create works that would not be possible with ethereal elements, the human soul chose density to experience unique types of growth and learning. At the lower frequency of physical matter, it would be possible to experience sensations such as touch, taste, texture, and especially the contrast between pleasure and pain that would become the great catalyst for spiritual evolution. It was the price to pay for the privilege of becoming conscious co-creators on the material plane. This vibrational transformation brought with it unique challenges that did not exist in the original Edenic state. Communication, once instantaneous and telepathic, became dependent on words and gestures. Movement, once as fluid as thought, became limited by the laws of physics. Perception, which once encompassed multiple dimensions simultaneously, became restricted to the 5 physical senses. But each limitation also brought a unique opportunity for growth. Through the difficulty of communication, we learned patience and understanding. Through physical limitations, we developed creativity and perseverance. Through restricted perception, we cultivated faith and intuition. But tell me one thing, can you feel in your own body, in your own life, the echoes of this ancestral vibrational descent? Are there times when you feel an inexplicable nostalgia, a longing for something you can't name, a sense of belonging to something greater and brighter? This is the cellular memory of the original frequency whispering in your heart, reminding you of where you came from and where you are returning to. Every deep meditation, every moment of spiritual ecstasy, every instant of unconditional love is a temporary return to that primordial vibration we never truly abandon completely. The most hopeful aspect of this understanding is knowing that the vibrational descent is reversible and in fact temporary. Cayce assures us that humanity is now in a process of vibrational ascension, consciously returning to higher frequencies, but this time carrying all the wisdom and experience acquired during the material journey. We are like musicians who have explored all the lower octaves and are now ready to create celestial symphonies with the knowledge acquired at all frequencies. The fall was only the first movement of a cosmic masterpiece that will culminate in the glorious return to the Father's house, enriched by all we have learned along the way. With the expulsion from Eden, something extraordinary and definitive happened in the history of consciousness. For the first time, humanity assumed full responsibility for its actions and their consequences. This was not a burden imposed by an angry God, but the natural awakening of beings who had chosen to experience free will in its fullest expression. It was as if, until then, we were children playing in a safe garden, protected by the wisdom of our parents, and suddenly became adults with the power and responsibility to shape our own destiny. This awakening was at once terrifying and liberating, painful and empowering. Adam and Eve, as archetypes of nascent humanity, represent this crucial moment when human beings ceased to be passive spectators of creation and became active participants in the cosmic drama. The pain of childbirth, mentioned in the biblical narrative, symbolizes not only physical suffering, but also the arduous work of giving birth to new realities through focused consciousness. Working the land represents not only agriculture, but the constant effort to cultivate our own spiritual nature amidst the limitations of matter. Each drop of sweat would be an opportunity for purification, each difficulty a chance to strengthen the soul. Mortality, which emerged as a consequence of this new condition, was not a cruel punishment, but rather an extraordinary pedagogical tool. Knowing that our physical existence has a finite term, created the necessary urgency to seek spiritual growth. Death became the great teacher, the one who constantly reminds us that we are not just these temporary bodies, but eternal souls experiencing a fleeting journey in matter. Through awareness of mortality, we develop compassion, spiritual urgency, and the precious ability to value each moment as a sacred gift. This newly acquired responsibility brought with it the possibility of both evolution and devolution, both ascension and even greater descent. For the first time, human beings could consciously choose between paths that would bring them closer to or further away from their divine essence. Every thought became a creative act, every word a force that could build or destroy, every action a seed that would germinate future consequences. Free will ceased to be an abstract concept and became a reality experienced with every breath, every choice, every moment of decision. The most transformative aspect of this awakening was the understanding that the return to Eden would now depend not on passive grace, but on the active and conscious participation of each individual soul. It would no longer be enough to simply exist in harmony. It would be necessary to consciously choose this harmony in each moment, to cultivate it deliberately, and to defend it courageously against the forces of disharmony. Responsibility became both the price and the reward of spiritual evolution. The price for having chosen the experience of separation, and the reward for having developed the capacity to consciously return to unity. Today, each of us experiences this awakening of responsibility on our personal journey. Every moment we recognize that we are the authors of our own experience, every time we consciously assume the consequences of our choices, every moment we decide to grow instead of blaming external circumstances, we are honoring this sacred legacy of Adam and Eve. Responsibility is not our burden, but our freedom. It is not our limitation, but our ability to co-create with the divine, a reality increasingly aligned with love, wisdom, and truth. Prepare your heart for a revelation that can completely transform your understanding of the sacred feminine and spiritual courage. While millennia of religious tradition have portrayed Eve as the culprit behind humanity's fall, Edgar Cayce presents us with a radically different and profoundly honoring vision. Eve was not the temptress who led Adam to sin, but rather the courageous pioneer who took the first step toward the conscious growth of the human soul. She represents that aspect of consciousness willing to risk the security of knowledge for the possibility of deeper wisdom. It was humanity's first act of evolutionary courage, disguised as disobedience. Eve symbolizes the receptive and intuitive force of consciousness, one that is not content with superficial answers, but seeks to understand the deeper mysteries of existence. When she listened to the serpent and considered its words, she was not being naive or easily manipulated, but rather exercising that specifically feminine quality of questioning, investigating, and seeking knowledge through direct experience. She was the manifestation of that aspect of the soul that prefers to learn through living, rather than merely through hearing. Her choice to eat the fruit was an act of courageous spiritual inquiry, not irresponsible rebellion. The great historical injustice was to transform this investigative courage into feminine guilt, when in fact, Eve represents the noblest aspect of the human search for truth. She is the archetype of the soul willing to leave the comfort of ignorance, to embrace the growth that comes through experiential knowledge, even knowing that this path will bring challenges. Her decision was not impulsive, but deeply considered, She understood that there was something important to be learned through the experience of duality, something that could not be understood by remaining in the innocence of Eden. It was a conscious sacrifice, not a reckless mistake. The symbolism of Eve offering the fruit to Adam represents the natural tendency of the receptive aspect of consciousness to share its discoveries with the active aspect. It was not a malicious temptation, but a loving invitation for both aspects of human consciousness to participate together in this new phase of evolution. Eve intuitively understood that the experience would be richer and more complete if lived in partnership, that the learning would be deeper if shared between the masculine and feminine aspects of the human psyche. She was the first to recognize that spiritual growth is a journey that must be walked in unity, not in separation. When we rehabilitate Eve as the courageous pioneer of conscious evolution, we are also rehabilitating the feminine principle as a legitimate force for spiritual inquiry and evolutionary growth. Eve represents all the women and men throughout history who have had the courage to question established truths, to seek knowledge through direct experience, to risk security in the name of growth. She is the archetype of all spiritual seekers who choose the most challenging path because they know it will also be the most transformative. Her courage resonates with every soul who decides to leave comfort zones to embrace greater possibilities. Eve's true honor lies in being the first to understand that the deepest love sometimes demands difficult choices, that fidelity to truth sometimes seems like disobedience to superficial rules, that authentic growth always involves some degree of risk and uncertainty. She teaches us that wisdom comes not from blind obedience, but from courageous inquiry, that evolution does not happen through safe stagnation, but through the responsible exploration of new territories of consciousness. Eve was not the first sinner, but humanity's first spiritual adventurer, and for this she deserves our gratitude, not our condemnation. While Eve represents the investigative courage that drives spiritual evolution, Adam embodies an equally essential force, the ability to structure, organize, and sustain experience in physical matter. He was not simply a passive follower who yielded to feminine temptation, but rather the aspect of consciousness responsible for anchoring spiritual discoveries in practical reality. Adam symbolizes that quality of the soul that transforms ethereal visions into concrete manifestations, that translates mystical insights into earthly applications. Without this structuring force, revelations would remain merely floating experiences with no lasting impact on human evolution. Adam's role as guardian of Eden before the fall represents his natural function to protect and maintain the established order, to preserve that which is sacred and valuable. But when he chose to accompany Eve in the experience of dual knowledge, he demonstrated profound wisdom. He understood that his true function was not to keep things as they were, but to sustain the evolutionary process even when this process required dramatic change. It was the decision of a mature guardian who understands that sometimes protecting something means allowing it to transform. His choice was an act of spiritual partnership, not masculine weakness. Adam represents the masculine principle of consciousness in its highest expression. Not authoritarian dominance, but the strength that provides structure and stability so that growth can occur safely. When he agreed to share in the experience Eve had initiated, he was offering the necessary container for this experience to fully unfold. He understood that the investigative aspect needed the structuring aspect, so that together they could successfully navigate the uncharted waters of dual existence. It was an act of practical wisdom, supporting intuitive wisdom. The genius of the partnership between Adam and Eve lies in the complementarity of their roles. As she explored possibilities, he ensured these explorations were solidly grounded. As she blazed new trails, he built safe bridges to tread them. As she dreamed of greater potentials, he created the practical conditions to manifest them. Together, they represent the sacred union between vision and manifestation, between inspiration and application, between the evolutionary impulse and the capacity to sustain evolution. Their partnership is the archetypal model of how the receptive and active aspects of consciousness can collaborate harmoniously. The work Adam took on after leaving Eden, tilling the land by the sweat of his brow, symbolizes much more than literal agriculture. It represents the sacred commitment to apply physical and mental energy to transform raw matter into ever more refined manifestations of divine consciousness. Every drop of sweat would be an offering, every effort an opportunity to co-create with the divine. Work was not punishment, but a privilege, the opportunity to consciously participate in the ongoing transformation of creation. Through dedicated effort, Adam and all humanity he represents would learn to find the sacred in the mundane, the divine in the earthly. Today, each of us carries within us both Eve and Adam, the courageous investigator who seeks new possibilities, and the wise guardian who structures these possibilities into manifested reality. When we honor both aspects of ourselves, when we allow our spiritual curiosity to be supported by our capacity for practical discipline, when we unite our mystical vision with our earthly resolve, we are living the sacred partnership that Adam and Eve represent. They teach us that authentic evolution requires both the courage to explore and the wisdom to integrate, both the willingness to risk and the ability to sustain, both feminine receptivity and masculine structure working in perfect harmony. Prepare to discover the best-kept secret about the fall of Adam and Eve, a truth that will forever transform your understanding of suffering, evolution, and human destiny. Edgar Cayce reveals to us that what we call the fall was actually the cosmic planting of the seeds of future redemption. Every pain humanity has experienced since then carries within it the spiritual genetic code for a return to the divine. It is as if the fall itself had been programmed with an internal navigation system that would inevitably guide us back home. The separation from Eden was not a definitive loss, but the first step in a circular journey that always knew its final destination. This extraordinary revelation shows us that a higher intelligence operates through the very human experience of suffering and limitation. Every tear shed carries within it the unconscious memory of a lost joy. Every moment of solitude awakens a longing for primordial union. Every experience of scarcity activates the memory of infinite abundance. Pain is neither random nor punitive, but pedagogically perfect. Every discomfort we experience is a whispered reminder that we belong to something greater, more beautiful, more complete. The fall planted in our spiritual DNA a divine nostalgia that never allows us to completely forget our true nature. The most profound aspect of this hidden legacy is that each generation carries within itself not only the memory of paradise lost, but also the map of the way back. This is why young children sometimes talk about places they've never physically visited, but recognize intuitively. This is why certain sounds, certain lights, certain experiences of beauty touch us so deeply that we're moved to tears without understanding why. We are remembering through our limited physical senses an infinitely vaster reality that inhabits our soul. Each moment of spiritual ecstasy is a fleeting glimpse of the Eden we carry perpetually in our hearts. The genius of this divine design lies in making the very process of seeking more important than any specific destination. The spiritual longing that the fall awakened in us keeps us eternally in evolutionary motion, eternally growing, eternally expanding our capacity to love and understand. If we had never left Eden, we would remain in a static bliss, beautiful but limited. Through the experience of separation, we develop spiritual muscles that did not exist before. Compassion born of shared suffering, strength forged in adversity, wisdom distilled from experience, love purified by loss and reunion. This hidden legacy means that nothing we experience is wasted. No experience is purposeless, no pain is meaningless. Every challenge we face is secretly conspiring to awaken us. Every obstacle is actually a stepping stone in disguise. Every apparent detour is part of a longer but richer path back to the source. The fall did not condemn us to wander lost. It equipped us with an infallible internal compass that always points home. This compass is love, and each time we choose to love rather than fear, we are following the secret map planted in our hearts from the first moment of separation. The most hopeful aspect of this revelation is the understanding that humanity as a whole is now reaching a turning point in this cosmic journey. The signs are everywhere: an unprecedented global spiritual awakening, a growing search for meaning beyond the material, a collective thirst for authentic connection and transcendent purpose. We are beginning to consciously harvest the seeds planted in the fall, developing technologies that reconnect, philosophies that reintegrate, practices that reconnect us with our divine essence. The hidden legacy of the fall is finally revealing itself in all its glory. transforming humanity from unconscious children of the divine into conscious and responsible co-creators of the cosmos. We have now reached the climax of this extraordinary revelation, the glorious destiny toward which the entire human journey has been directed since the first moment of conscious separation. Edgar Cayce assures us that the return to Eden is not only possible, but inevitable, not as a nostalgic return to the past, but as a transformative ascension to a state of consciousness infinitely richer and more complete than the original. It will be Eden Plus, enriched by all the experience, wisdom, and love we have acquired during our journey through duality. We will no longer be innocent children playing in a sheltered garden, but mature spiritual adults consciously co-creating paradise through love, purified by experience. This return will not be geographic or collective in the traditional sense, but individual and interior, each soul rediscovering within itself that state of perfect harmony between body, mind, and spirit that characterized the original Edenic condition. But this time it will be sustained not by ignorance of duality, but by its conscious transcendence. We will have learned to find unity amid diversity, peace amid movement, love amid apparent lovelessness. The inner Eden will be achieved not through escape from the world, but through the transformation of our perception of it.